Babes, thank you very much. Yes, lovely, Roche, lovely to have you. I was just talking to your dad earlier on about the time we spent together on APSA. And I think that was all about improving the BCBS submission ratio and building a warehouse that would take the data from their product reporting. Just the other day, we were talking about it in terms of the number of chartered accountants that they were using to resolve and recon the balance sheets and everything like that. And I remember you played an integral part on analyzing the balance sheet. At that stage, I was quite impressed at your skills on Excel and balance sheet manipulation. So thanks. It was great to spend time with you. I know that David sends his regards. He's in New Zealand now. I'm not sure when last you spoke to him, but just the other day he said, "Oh, how's it going?" And please send my regards to Roche. So
thank you. I haven't spoken to him since he just left Liberty and moved to New Zealand. So that's probably about a good 7 years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah. All yours, Roche.
Fantastic. Thank you, Howard. Okay, awesome. Just let me know as soon as you can see my screen.
We can see it.
Okay,
Roche,
awesome.
just to say that I will be monitoring the chat, and then I'll try to choose a nice point to interrupt or ask you the question, if that's okay, or would you like to handle it at the end?
No, I'm happy to. I've got a section at the end for questions, but I'm happy to handle it live as it happens. I tend to find it's quicker and the answers can be shorter and the questions can be shorter. So
fantastic.
We move on.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you very much, Howard and Dharma, for the opportunity to have this conversation or to showcase what we've done. Interestingly enough, although we find ourselves today in a space where we supply a tool in anti-money laundering, specifically the sanctions side of things, it all started out as a data problem. And it started out solving a data issue, and that brought us to this point. So everything we've done was around solving for data. And the reason it started and where this all comes from is we were busy implementing a anti-money laundering end-to-end system within a space of a company in South Africa, listed entity, FSP, and they had to get across the line very quickly for their deadlines that were looming at that point in time for the getting everything in place. And we were dealing with some of the biggest sanctions companies out there, and it was fascinating to see how the salesman talk and the reality of the data didn't match up at all. So you've got salesmen telling you all these beautiful things about the data and how the system works, or that the data works. You get it and you try and integrate it into your systems and start getting the things to work, and it's just a nightmare. It took forever to get the data just landed. Then to just try and get these things to work on a daily basis was a nightmare. Then building algorithms on top of that to actually try and understand the data was quite complex. And with the methodologies that we developed at that point in time to solve these problems, which are all incorporated into the tool, we took them from 60,000 potential daily hits on a 2 million client book that they just couldn't understand, and the volume is just too large. They couldn't get, the case managers couldn't work through that volume because it's humanly impossible. We took them down to 5 really high-risk individuals that they had to understand as an initial point. So if you talk about risk differentiation within a book and trying to understand a client lifecycle, client set and highlight risk, if you've got 60,000 hits, basically saying my entire book's in screen. Where if you've got 5 hits and you can pinpoint that 5, you can investigate them, you can do something about it. That means you can actually isolate that risk and mitigate and understand it. So this was all born out of the frustration of that. And then secondly, which was one of the bigger frustrations, was that if you wanted to change something, if you wanted to add something, if you wanted to do anything, it was priced in dollars and euros, and it was just completely impossible to do. It wasn't an option. So you had to take what they gave you and work with it and try and adapt it on your side. So that's how Monitor was born. So to take you through just some basics about it. Just the agenda.
Sorry, Roche.
Yeah.
Sorry, Roche. Could I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
What was the sort of size of the penalties? I know there was reputation risk. I actually remember a bank in Australia getting caught for allowing child pornography type of stuff. But what's the size or the financial risk that these guys are carrying?
It's dependent. So it's dependent on, number one, how nice you are of the regulator. Number two is it's the size of the company, and then also the severity of the breach. Let's call it that, or non-compliance. So it's a difficult question. They are publicized. There are some available. I actually don't have it offhand, but they can be quite substantial, and to the extent that you've got teams sitting companies with 2 million client base. I mean, it's nowhere near Standard Bank or Absa size that are employing 20, 30 people in a division just to manage this risk. So it's substantial, but it's also a misnomer, because the fine is one part of it, but if you find yourself in a situation that South Africa finds itself in today with our political situation, etc., and especially around our risk of being sanctioned ourselves, considering our grey list status or grey list status and state capture. We as corporate South Africa or business South Africa also have a responsibility and to be good corporate citizens. And this is part of it. It's not only the fine, it's also doing your part to solve the problems we have in the country as well. And that's, we can talk about a little bit more philosophical side of that. But yeah, that's in essence what it is. Yeah, cool. From an agenda perspective, just a quick introduction on the tool. Some of the core function of the tool, things that set it apart from our competition. Then we're going to delve into how we source our data. What do we do with that data once we've sorted it? How do we automate those steps through automation and GitHub actions? How do we store the data? And there's interesting things there. The CRUD component of it, because of the nature of the data, and we'll get to that, where we use Prisma as our tool to help us with that. How we handle client data, which is very important. That speaks to the integration component. Then our security and compliance measures. What are we putting in place? What do we have in place, and where do we work towards that? And then system performance and scalability, followed by a conclusion, a quick demo, and then if we don't do questions throughout, and you want to ask questions at the end, we can also have that there. Okay. So, introduction to our monitor. Simple. It is a comprehensive platform that enables clients to adhere to the screening obligations for politically exposed individuals or persons, sanctions and adverse media with exceptional efficiency and reliability. Now, the sanctions domain is quite interesting because it covers sanctions, it covers politically exposed individuals, and it covers risks, right? So any risk that we as an organization or an organization may perceive as something that we don't have a tolerance level for, that could potentially be included. So we could be doing business with an individual that's not been charged or found guilty of anything, but may have been implicated or is known to be associated with, and as an organization we decide we don't want to do business with them, this type of tool will be able to give you that information. So what are the challenges that most other tools face at this point in time? Expensive, because 99%, if not all of them, are housed, developed, maintained, and looked after by individuals sitting overseas, charging dollars, etc., etc. Stale data, and the reason for this is they employ massive amounts of researchers, humans sitting there researching these lists and individuals and trying to find information about them. But obviously, if you take a 4 million or a 3 million or 2 million individual and entity set of data, and you've got 450 people researching that data set, at some point, some of that data is going to get stale and then and then updated, and then it's stale. So you've got an issue with that. You've got this overwhelming number of potential hits that come out. The fuzzy logic is not always explained. It's often, and it talks to black boxes and black boxes. So when you get something, you're not sure what priority you need to give it. Is it more of a risk than the other one? And you can't differentiate that risk as a team of investigators or case managers. Integration is complex. Some of them do have APIs, some don't. Some have only batch capabilities, some don't. It's very complex, and trying to get that to work in your environment is almost impossible in some instances. You'll have to go back to their portals and use their portals. It's very difficult. Scalability issues, just in terms of trying to I mean, I had a client that was emailing 2.5 million client records on a daily basis in a CSV file to Dubai, if I'm not mistaken, was where the company was sitting. You can imagine if that's a 50 million client book, it's just impossible to send that type of data. Then you've got the other emphasis on rules-based systems. They typically are, these on-switch, off-switch type setups where you switch things on and off, and that's it. It's rule-based. There's no smartness to it. The algorithms aren't smart enough, or they don't use AI. It's just rule-based. And then obviously a lot of them are black box. If you want to try to change the risk rating, you've got to get a specialist in to actually come and change it. That individual is either from overseas that needs to come in to do it, or they need to call into your systems and do it, and they charge obviously dollars and euros, which just escalates costs again. So what's the features that we've got in our tool that we think mitigate these? First of all, it's locally developed. It's developed by ourselves. It's our own tool. So any customization happens through us. It's a tool for South Africa and Africa ultimately. So we can develop it. It's RAHN based. It's not euro and dollar based. So that makes a big difference in terms of the take up of the solution. We've got a daily database that we update daily. So that's updated on a daily basis. We've got currently, as it's today, we've got approximately 3.5 million individuals and entities covering plus minus 115 lists. To give you an idea, typically there's about 5 or 6 lists that cover the majority of individuals, and that would be OFAC, your UN, some of the US, those types of lists that typically sit there, and they've got most of that information. The code is the biggest risk, but obviously it's the nuances that makes the difference often. The algorithms are streamlined for case management, so we've got different options giving you different types of outputs, so hierarchies, probability models, etc., that we can apply to it. Obviously, depending on the size of your team. If you've got a big team that can do research, we set the fuzzy logic at a more fuzzy level, and if it's a small team, we go for more exact hits. So we try and isolate risk and try and work on that basis so we can fit it into your investigation and your actual capability of handling this. We've got artificial intelligence built in, and I'll show you those types, the outcome of that. We've got multiple integration points available. We use best practices, and we'll deal with all of those as well. And everything is cloud-based and scalable. That makes it easy for us to expand, grow. If we need to add additional, it's not a problem. At this point in time, we've estimated that once we've gone through a complete sourcing cycle, which is extremely complex, we should be around 75 million records at some point. That would include anybody that scammed people on anything like, for example, credit card fraud, those type of things. We're going to try and include those. All of the leak documents, so your Panama leaks, Singapore leaks, all of those, we're going to try and incorporate that at some point as well. So this is ever expanding, and we've designed our system to be able to work with 75 million records ultimately. And to give you an idea, we're sitting at 3.5 million today, and that covers pretty much every list that's out there, from a sanctions perspective and police lists, political lists, etc., etc. So getting to 75 million is going to be quite a substantial push to get to that point. Okay, core functions. So we've got advanced AI due diligence. In essence, short and sweet, we've developed our AI to enhance the due diligence component. So you don't utilize AI and its associated costs to do your screening. You identify the individuals that are potentially risky in your business. You narrow that list down. You take that list and you put that through the AI capability, and it gives you back actual analysis of that individual that can be included in your reporting, etc., so that you can actually understand what you're working with. So it's the whole principle is to try and bring everything down to a manageable number, and then you can work the cases that you need to work. Our matching algorithm is quite advanced. It's based on probabilities, so we look at probabilities of characters, matching, etc. Our reports are all from those matches are all based Excel and PDF, and that's white labeled. So whichever way you want to present it, if it's within an organization, want to include it in your reporting packs going to board or a risk committee, that's available that way. Yeah, it's a seamless processing through our online platform. All of that happens there. We've got multiple integration points. As I mentioned earlier, we've got batch scan notification. What's nice about the batch scan notification, you upload the batch, you close the program, you close your laptop, you go home. We run it on our side in memory, we process it, and once it's done, the report is actually emailed to you with a notification that it's ready and you can continue doing what you need to do. So you don't have to sit there and wait for the thing to run at day end or at night. Tomorrow morning, it's there, everything's done. We've got, we can add continuous monitoring. So where that comes in, where that's useful is, you've scanned me today, I'm not on a sanctions list. 2 months from now, I'm added to a sanctions list. You're not aware of this. We will pick it up. We'll send a notification to you that you've scanned this individual previously and they've now subsequently been added to the sanctions list, and we can give that information. And that's an option that you can switch on. So if you don't feel, you haven't collected all the permissions to share information with third parties, for example, that goes past just the original legal requirement, you can switch it off and it won't give you notifications. If you want to, it will. And obviously there's cost nuances to that. So we've got seamless integration through APIs, so you can completely integrate into our environment, give us real-time feeds, real-time outputs, get your results going. So it shortens that onboarding process substantially compared to having to manually run it through or wait at end of day batches and things run for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours to get through. It just smooths all of that out. One of the cool features we're putting in, this is actually quite an interesting one from a golden source perspective. So we've got a custom database. So what this allows an organization to do, or an organization, is to import a list of individuals that they've identified as do not do business. So individual treated your staff badly, the client previously tried something, but you caught them out, or something like that, but it's not necessarily a sanction, but you want to stop them from accessing your organization through any way. So they can't onboard through a kiosk or onboard via a mobile app where a branch won't pick up that this individual. You can actually then scan them against that list and identify them. This can be managed. You can purge this list, you can update the list. We've got whitelisting, all these type of capabilities in there. Now, where this comes really interesting is when we start looking at trying to find a single version of the truth in a client data set. So well, what most of you would have seen with especially the bigger organizations, you often run into a situation where they've, through mergers and acquisitions, have built up these sets of data for various clients. And they've never integrated this into a central repository where it's a unique and a single record for a client. So they've got these multiple records potentially where there's more duplicates of clients. Now, it's often a problem to try and migrate these and get it sorted out, where this tool actually then can do it for you, because what it does is it uses the same methodology as the sanctions list. So if you can imagine that the sanctions list is our target and the source is our client list, we are matching the client and the source data or the sanctions list to each other and seeing if there are any matches based on a probability outcome. Now, if you take the custom database and you load all of these separate systems one by one into that set, and you've got your client list on the other side that you think is your unique list at this point in time, you can start building it up by doing these matches and having probability against them. So it goes away from the sanctions capability, but using the same data capabilities to achieve a different outcome. It's quite interesting one around that. As I mentioned previously, so we've got a global sanction coverage. It's all the major political figures. We've got access to various comprehensive data sets for informed due diligence. We've got downloadable search results, and we maintain this data set on a daily basis. It's updated. Our adverse media side is quite interesting. This is where you can then take your investigations further. We've identified somebody, there's a risk, we take the due diligence a little bit further, and we can then start looking at adverse media. So we've got over 2,000 news sources. We've got our own proprietary GPT natural language processing capability that we've built in that will provide you with a summary of that. So that can all be used in your reporting. So if you think of case management, you've narrowed down the amount of people that you potentially have that are risky, so you've shortened that list. Then through that, you've identified which are the ones you need to focus on based on probability. Now you've put that through a further enhancement of that information, and all you're doing is taking up-to-date real-time data, current data, so as they are today, and you're updating that and enriching that data. So coming back to what we talked about, one of the constraints of the current tools is they've got these massive teams, and when I mentioned they've got stale data sometimes, is that those teams need to work through it progressively, and at some point somebody is behind and they're going to catch up at some point. But you searching today, you're not going to get this guy. With our tool, you've got that immediately available. It's today. We were sitting with the municipality a couple of months ago, and we went through a demo where and they asked us about a specific individual, and that morning a newspaper article came out that this particular individual was doing business with their political party, and we could identify immediately that that person is a risk right there, and they could make a decision not to do business with them. So that's a type of information that's really powerful. You can so that's all around that. So okay, so that's the features of the tool.
Sorry, Rian. Sorry, Roche. I was really interested in that master data matching. Basically, we refer to it as entity resolution, and sure what's happening. And so this entity resolution, you are using the same techniques that you use for looking at suspicious people. You're using for just finding whether this is a duplicate or it's already in the database, and then matching it according to a set of features, and you're using some form of key. Is that? Can you just explain a little bit more in terms of? Do you also use the GPT natural language processing to do that matching as well?
We are expanding our capability to include that as well as a secondary backup. So initially, our first part is a algorithm that runs through, and it's got a specific pattern that it's looking for, and it's looking for patterns between all of these things. What we're doing on top of that is we are enabling the GPT or the AI component to actually improve the algorithm, come back with improvements. How do we improve that algorithm? How can we actually get better results out of it? So it's a continuous learn and improvement process that we're going through.
And just that application to customers to solve their duplicate customer records and multiple customers, what is the value that they can, because almost in a way you can get that golden record and then help them build the master data from that. So in a way, is that what you were saying? You can use the same approach to help them resolve their customer duplicates.
Yes. Yeah. You can use the same approach, and because you've got a source and target that you're measuring against each other, and it's just the way that we configure the output, right? So the output today is to tell you where they match. The output in terms of that is to configure it to tell you where you don't match.
Yeah.
So
okay.
In essence, the capability is there. We just need to rejig it for whoever needs it for that purpose. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, then data sourcing and consolidation. So if you consider what we represent, it's essentially it's a big data set that we bring together, and then we've got tools on top of that that read that data set against your client data set, and then produce outputs from there. So the fundamental first principle that we need to achieve and the thing that we need to do is we need to collect that data into our environment. So we go and source this data. It comes through private and government entities, and it comes in various forms. Some are HTML enabled, some are PDF, and often some are just web pages that we have to go and actually HTML scrape and get information out of them. So it's a massive process to try and get all this information together, and we'll get to it. But basically, it ends up today at 20 gigs of data that we bring together on a daily basis and try and resolve. The XML files often are comprehensive that we receive from the sanctions organizations. They include names, date of birth, nationalities, and reasons to be sanctioned. Interestingly enough here, and I've seen this often, is where they try and look at addresses, they try and look at ID numbers and things like that. We've got to remember that 99% of the information, or all of the information contained in this data set, is public domain information. Now, addresses and ID numbers and things like that often aren't public domain. To give you an idea, at some point, and it might have been updated, but at some point I did a test on Osama bin Laden, and all they had was a year of birth. They didn't have a full date of birth for him. So you've got to understand that at the end of the day, the most important information that we put into this is the names. That's what we have. The rest of the things are quite difficult to get together and get and rely on either side, right? So from a sanctions listing perspective and from a client data side, we know often there's big gaps in client data sets, especially with legacy systems and mergers and acquisitions and those type of things. We then consolidate all the data. So the sanctions, all these various sources are unified into a database, and at that point in time we do some data validation to clean out some of the elements. We dedupe where we need to dedupe, and we clean out all these data sets and basically build a one standard data base or data table. The data format is standardized, so we standardize across to be able to put it into the same place. We include some specialist sources, like, for example, Interpol, SAPS, and for them, we need to actually physically scrape their websites. SAP's website, you've got to scrape the website. And in terms of that, we've got to do a couple of interesting things, because we've got to go and look at the actual website. And often in the website, they've got a robot.io, if I'm not mistaken, is a little package that gives you information of the website and what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do on the website. We maintain a list of that. We adhere to those, and we try and make sure that we continuously monitor that to check if those things change and update, so we can actually make sure we stay legal. And then we've got continuous monitoring and updating. So the scraping tools especially are continuously monitored, because if the website structure changes, because it's an HTML scraper, if the structure of the website changes, then our scraper is not going to work anymore, and we've got to update our scraper. So it's a continuous process of going through them, checking them, making sure that they're fine, and then also obviously checking for these legal requirements to make sure that we are allowed to actually utilize that information and take it off the website. Then from a data management schema perspective, so now we've sourced all the data. Now we've got to put it into the right places and get it running. So as I mentioned, we've got about 20 gigabytes of data that we've put into the data into our database. We've got an entity table, which is our main table that contains all of the information. We've got relationship tables that maintain relationships between individuals and entities. So for example, if it's a company that's been listed plus their directors, we maintain that type of information and listing against that. We've got some metadata tables, just from a traceability and transparency perspective, to try and understand what we're looking at. We apply a lot of indexing. So the indexing is fundamental for our performance. If we don't have the indexing, we can't achieve our turnaround times that we have currently on the 20 gigabyte data set. We maintain our audit, and then we've got a audit and history tables, security and compliance tables as well. So this is all the additional information that we keep on these records. And then we've got a structured schema that enables effective data processing, high quality performance, and adherence to stringent security and compliance standards. So that, from a data management and schema perspective, that's mainly what we do in that space. Then from an automation perspective, we use GitHub to automate everything. That gives us a lot of flexibility. It gives us versioning. It allows us to keep a record of everything that we have, not necessarily on our own, but other systems. So if we're ever compromised, considering the fact that we are regarded as the good guys in this scenario, we potentially are at risk for somebody trying to come after our database and clean it up. We've got all the backups and stuff like we need, and then we've got the GitHub components to help us rebuild and reassemble if we need to. So we do daily automation through GitHub. That includes, and we'll get to that, our CRUD components. We function on Windows Server with SQL. That gives us an environment to handle these volumes of data. It's skill sets are available. It's not difficult for us to find people to be able to do that should we need to. It just enables us to maintain everything in a very good and efficient structure. We've got scheduled updates that run on midnight daily, and that it adds new records. It removes records that have been removed. So we do a delta check. We check if this is the set today, this is the set we have. Are there additions? We add. Are there people being removed? We take them off. Are there updates to the records? We update the records. And then subsequently, if we remove them, we actually park them first for a while, and then eventually, when we get to our purge cycle, we actually take them out. The runtime, so this is quite interesting. So our daily update runs between 30 minutes and an hour, and that's for 3.5 million records, over 115 lists. And that's scraping jobs, those are XML jobs, those are PDFs, and we believe that's quite efficient, and we're quite happy with that. We've designed our system for high volume processing, so we've built it up to, at this point in time, 5 million records. Now, considering we're sitting at 3.5 million, and that covers that amount of lists, we don't see that limit getting reached quickly, but we can scale, and we've got the tools in place to be able to do that. Workflow management is obviously done through GitHub, so that gives us a nice, efficient, streamlined way to get through these things and get our executions running and our tasks up and daily scheduled, and that works quite well. And then our infrastructure is obviously then run through Windows Server Cloud, which helps quite a bit. That allows us to scale as we grow and just limit costs from that perspective. So data storage solutions. So as I said, we use the Microsoft Cloud Microsoft Cloud itself, so SharePoint, etc. That's our client data storage location. Our raw data is in a SQL in a different service. So we actually separate the two from each other. And the only time we actually keep client data is from reports where we've got matches, or if we're doing continuous monitoring. The rest of it, while we're processing batch or API, is all done in memory. So that allows us to purge, clean, and get out of it, and we don't keep any client data at that point in time. So from a security perspective and a privacy perspective, that gives us a nice benefit around that. As I mentioned, raw data files, we can handle CSV, so that's for the bulk uploads. So typically, for example, if we sign up a client, they've got a client base that they would like to screen and check and make sure that they didn't miss anybody in that client base with the previous supplier, or if they've been doing it manually, because that often does happen. They will give us they go onto the platform, and I'll show you later. They can upload a CSV file there. We process that offline and produce the results. So at least that gives you a bulk setup. If you don't have the technical capability within the organization to do API integration, we can do it. We obviously then do it through bulk uploads on a daily basis. Somebody logs into the website, uploads, and it goes on. You don't have to email it to somebody somewhere else in another country. That's done. We've got some performance metrics that we've obviously built in. Things like uptime, processing time, data integrity, resource utilization, the number of insert, delete, and update operations that we do. We also look at downtime. So if a list is not available, we get notifications of those, so we can ensure that the next time around, there's obviously going to be an increase in processing on that particular set. As I said, we've got the API and the batch handling, and then obviously everything, again, security and compliance is fundamental, and we try and do everything we can at every level to mitigate as much risk there as we can. Okay, so our code operations with Prisma's object relational mapping. This helps us with our create, read, update, and delete parts, and that's fundamental, considering that on a daily basis we've got this update. Prisma streamlines everything, helps us with our integration into our data model. It makes everything just so much better. I haven't myself worked on it, but my engineers tell me that this is a game changer for them. It's just changed entirely the way they actually function with in the context of the database management and data model management. Client data handling, batch for API. So on a batch side, as I said, we've got the batch screening for larger volumes. We've got a single search function as well. So if your organization, it could be DOM. So for DOM, a new member wants to join, you don't have 50 of them joining a week. You don't have 500 joining on a day. You know, it's a low volume. You don't have to do batch processing. You don't have to do that. You can go onto the website, type in the individual's name, and get output. Right. So, so we offer various levels depending on the type of organization and your volume that you actually want to put through. If you've got a CRM that's a standard CRM, we can help you with that API integration, get it onto your CRM and do your real time. Then you don't have to worry about the batch processing. If you want to do overnight runs on your client set, just to make sure that you cover that, you can do that via the batch, or you can just pump it in via the API as well. This gives us the flexibility and responsiveness we want out of the system. And it allows that clients can actually interact with us in various ways. It's not this one size fits all type approach that never works. The efficiency and data management. Between the distinction between the batch and API handling, we want to optimize the data process flows, ensuring efficient resource utilization and timely data management. I mean, that's obvious. Okay, security and compliance measures. So authentication, as we use session state cookies for all authentication purposes. It's two-factor authentication via email. So you log in with a password, we'll send you a phrase or key that will be entered into a website, and that's how you log in. We obviously, as I said, we adhere to the legal standards in terms of data protection, in terms of privacy. We obviously a secondary user, so the individual or the companies that provide us with their client data will have to have that POPI compliance in place in terms of getting downstream processing authorization from their data subjects, but that should be standards in the T's and C's, because this is for a legal reason, which is compliance to the FICA Act. Data protection, obviously I mentioned. So we've got we conduct audits on the system where we ensure through using API, various tools to check that we actually get the right results out, and that as new sanctions are added, that we actually get those updates and they come through onto the sets. So we use media and we use the actual data sets to compare and check that these things happen. Scalability and performance, obviously that's fundamental. That's what we try and achieve with everything we do. So everything is designed around scaling and keeping costs at not charging a client, our first or second or third or fourth client, for the capability that we've developed, and then everybody else, nothing. It's spread as the size grows and we scale on that. On that note, one of the interesting features of our model is that we are purely a pay-as-you-go model. We don't have any license fees. We don't have any fees other than what you use. If you scan one record, you pay for one record. If you scan 50,000, you pay for 50,000. It's as simple as that. Okay, system performance and scalability. As I said, we've got the
Sorry, Roche.
Yes.
I'll just ask you on your data privacy issue.
Yes.
You did mention that it's based on a legal basis, the FICA Act, and from a point of view of your externals like GDPR and California or Canada, how do you handle that sort of those jurisdictional issues or other data privacy requirements?
It's a good question. We've designed everything at this point in time with the broader GDPR principles in place.
Right.
However, we don't have a client from there yet that can guide us through that process, because there's a lot of learning that we've got to do as a South African company around GDPR, which is more strict than POPI Act. And for that reason, we've designed it around that. We're ready for it. Once we need to get to that, and whatever we need to do to comply, we will ensure that we can get to that.
But sorry, I'm missing something, because you are picking up records across all of the regulators or the people looking after these things. So you would pick up records of international citizens, and you will be sharing your insights based on them. So how do you? I mean, so how do you get away from it? Because it's not just the company that you're servicing, but it's also the people that you're looking at.
Yeah, it's public domain. So these sanctions lists are produced public domain sanctions lists, right? So it's FATF regulations that we've got to screen against this. So I find it very difficult to find the rationale where GDPR will come down on us, for the simple reason that this is public domain information and it is in line and in ordinance with international laws and international standards.
And because you're getting it from their regulators, they are handling the purpose. So they are publicly dealing with that purpose statement, and you're pulling it off their website, basically, right? So if basically, I think what you're saying is, if they can do it, you can do it. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is the problem with these, especially with international laws. Very few of them have been tested in our courts, and how do we apply it? We can shy away from it, or we can try and find a solution and be as transparent in the process as we can.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so system performance and scalability. So as I mentioned, we use CRUD operations through Prisma to get our responsiveness sorted out and get the efficiency of our data management tasks sorted. Our API design is done through Flask server. We do our API routes. We use OpenAI as API as our specification, where we need open APIs for example, for clients to interact with our data sets. We've built over 100 API routes to be able to integrate into the system. So we've got various elements where you can touch and get into it. This obviously gives us, and then our architecture has been designed. Everything that we've done was done with robustness and adaptability and scalability built into the design thinking behind everything. So, getting to a conclusion, it's a comprehensive data management approach. You're dealing with massive amounts of data, so you've got to be efficient with it. Every time you touch it, every time you use it, it's got to be clean. You've got to make sure that you're not using duplicate records. What we do, so for example, if somebody comes up on multiple lists, we consolidate it in one record and we list all the lists, so that we can try and get that number down all the time, because somebody that's on FATF could be on UN, could be on OFAC, could be on, sorry, OFAC and UN, and can be on SAPS, so we try and combine that into that set. We've got a robust data foundation, so operational effectiveness lies in a systematic approach to sourcing and consolidating data. We've got advanced data handling and storage, so we're using SQL. It's proven, it works, it does what it needs to do. Don't have to get fancy around it. It does exactly what we need it to do. You can use other fancy methods to interact with it or place the data, but SQL is, in our mind, is the gold standard for what we want to achieve. We've got streamlined data maintenance, so the system focuses on efficiency and data integrity, facilitating streamlined data maintenance processes with a crucial and dynamic nature of endpoint inventory. We've got flexibility in data processing, so that's in how we handle our data, so we can actually get that integration working well. Security compliance is at the forefront. It's what we need to achieve. It's everything that we need to chase after is around security and compliance. Once we've set it up and got everything there, the balance of what we do is around that. And then the scalability. So as we grow the business, we can, and the client base, we can scale from there. Okay. Is there any on the technicalities, any questions at this point in time from the floor?
I've got a few questions, but I'd like to let some other people have a chance. Any question, Mr. Kennedy, anything from your side?
Yeah, it's probably a devious question, but as a citizen, is there an opt-out from this?
Well, if you've been listed as a criminal, you're not going to be opt-out. So
only how I can tell you that.
Sorry?
Only how I can tell you that.
But
this is a regulatory criminal thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, what you've actually got is a comprehensive authorized list of reference data that you're checking up against.
100%. 100%. What we do offer as well is we've got a one-button clear everything off our database option. So if you've used us as a client and tomorrow you decide you want to move on to somebody else, so one button you have to slide, and you can clear all the data we have on you. We'll clear your entire record. So that's automatically done in the background. It's not even a human that intervenes. So we've made it as easy as possible to not do business with us if you don't like us, and if you want to do business with us as well. It's easy.
Any other questions?
Roche, I have one question. You mentioned earlier that you guys use some web scraping, obviously to gather some of the information. So anyways, I was speaking to a guy a couple of months ago, and they do, like a bunch of RPA general automation. And one thing he told me, which I found like so fascinating, was that for certain of their applications, they needed to do web scraping, but then obviously the website would change. So what they started doing was they started using an LLM, and in the prompt, they actually obviously gave it all of the HTML and asked it, write us some code to parse all of this HTML and get a specific value for a field or something. So I don't know how practical this is, especially, for what you're doing and the type of websites you're working with. But I would just like to know, your opinion on that.
Look, at this point in time, we are adopters of AI, right? So we are driving whatever we can adapt to improve what we're doing using AI and streamline and make faster what we're doing. We're happy to look at that and try it and find if it works for us. So, Janku, very good question. As we expand our capabilities with AI, our first round was to first ensure that the service we offer to our client, that's going to be the first round where we can, from a low-hanging fruit perspective, where we can give them a lot of value. Second round now is we're looking at our algorithms in our version, our next it's called our next release of our tool. We're including transaction monitoring into it. So that's where we're looking at different levels of transactions coming through bank accounts, etc., we incorporating that into finding patterns, various patterns in transaction data. So we're continuously expanding our usability use case around AI in our toolset. The main thing is time and resources to roll out to all the different areas that we can expand it, but that's definitely somewhere that there's a lot of value in.
Okay, interesting. Thanks so much.
Now, Janke, just to share with you as well, I'm engaged with somebody that's looking after ESG sustainability, and they analyze a lot of the balance sheets, and they moved over from trying to standardize the input to using, they've just finished a prototype using LLM. So if you are interested in understanding of that a bit more, I can share some of the details.
Okay.
Yeah, we
very
also
interesting. Yeah.
we're actually also giving this the same crowd the same problem for the same people that try to see if we can solve it as well.
Okay.
That's
Nice.
interesting problem. Okay, anything else?
Carl, I'm sure you got a question.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. It was fascinating. So a quick question about sort of the mix of technologies. So that Prism ORM, that's a Node.js backend, but you also mentioned your Flask for the web sort of the middleware or the GUI side of. So I'm a bit. Why did you not go like Python all the way to the back end, or why did you not go Node.js all the way to the GUI? So the mix, because it's always a bit of a challenge to resource a project if the more technologies you deploy.
So, Carl, it's a function of a number of elements. One is the resource or the skill sets available to us in our pool. Two is what's best for purpose. What are we trying to achieve? Often it's out of necessity where we get stuck with our, let's say, for example, our capability in a specific field is not strong enough, and we need to find a way to solve the problem. So it's been an exercise of resource utilization and optimization that's resulted in many of the decisions we've made, and then all of that with this fundamental backbone of it's got to be secure, and we've got to make sure that we adhere to the legal outcomes that we need to.
Yeah, thank you. I think for historical reasons, it's always a good answer. It's oftentimes it's not a perfect world, right?
Yeah, no, it isn't. If it was, I mean, I would build everything in VBA, but unfortunately, it's frowned upon and it doesn't work that well.
So maybe then just a similar question, Roche, in terms of, it seems like you haven't gone with the traditional master data system that does some of this matching and making sure you achieve that golden record. Did you almost created that thing yourself? Did you need more functionality on finding and resolving this matching algorithm? What was your reason for? Am I correct? It doesn't seem like you've used the master data system like Prof C or those things. You've done it on your own.
Yeah, we've done it on our own, and for a number of reasons. It's to learn to do it on our own, to figure it out, solve the problem for ourselves. Number one, and number two is it gives us the flexibility to change whatever we want to. And this is one of the things. I mean, as you know, I come out of the BCom background, and I've taught myself computer science and computers. Clients, humans, can come up with the most interesting questions and ideas that you could never yourself imagine they can come up with.
Yeah.
And we had to have as much flexibility as we could. We actually at some point considered gearing ourselves that we can custom, and we're actually building our version 2 of the tool, that each and every client has got its own custom algorithm. They can customize it to their extent that they need it to be, and
Okay.
they can build various scenarios, scenarios that feed up into the reporting lines and scenarios that feed down into the operational reality to try and pick up where we see interesting things happening. That's not necessarily part of our regulatory reporting requirement, but part of our internal understanding of fraud and how people utilize our systems to commit various forms of anti-money laundering and terrorist financing.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So let's quickly have a check at our tool. So obviously standard dashboard on our front end. You can see the website, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So a little video that you can go through on your own that explains everything, and we take you through some of the various capabilities of the toolset. But from a user perspective, you can log in. So I'm just going to go through the process of getting everything sorted. Obviously, I closed everything before the session. About this, I'm just loading. While we're waiting, are there any other questions?
The one question that I had, and you focused on name matching, basically just getting the name right. But I'm assuming you're building a key that creates that unique customer key that has got to be more than a name, because we've got name duplicates. So, and one of the things that we always do when it's master data is we continue to add attributes that ensure that we resolve one and only one, and we're not giving false or false negatives or positives. What sort of level are you doing in terms of trying to ensure that you're getting that one and only one customer? What is that complexity looking like at the moment?
The keys, I think we actually do show. No, that's not the right. That's right.
Sorry, I'm
sorry. I'm trying to type and do everything at
talk at the same time.
Yeah,
multi-failing. They call it multi-failing.
Yep, you know the what's it? The presentation curse. Try and get this outlet to start operating properly, but that seems like the issue. So I just want to check. Oh, one chain. I. Here we go. Sorry. So I'm completely lost. What was the question?
Not to worry. I'll when you've gone through the demo. Let's come back to it.
Cool. So when you open up dashboard, that dashboard obviously shows you your recent searches from an organizational perspective. If you are the compliance manager, the LRO, you can see what's from a batch perspective that's been put through. So if somebody's running batches, you can understand all of that, because obviously from a cost perspective, those are important elements to understand. The next section that you can set up is your organization. So the way we designed it is that there are a lot of professionals in the market that are consultants, legal professionals that offer compliance services to smaller organizations. So somebody that's got 5,000 clients doesn't necessarily employ a full-time case manager or a compliance individual. They actually use a consultant to do that. What this allows you is to set up multiple organizations under your logging. So as a user, you've got multiple organizations, and what that enables you to do is separate client data, so that you don't combine client data with each other. You've got silos of client information that's associated to your profile, but it at least gives you that opportunity to use the tool in one context. So one client is individual scans, another client might be batch or API. Yes, Carl.
Roche, yes. So you multi-tenant, but you multi-tenant in sort of hierarchical multi-tenant. So you have levels of multi-tenancy.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, thanks.
Cool. Now we get into the nitty-gritty. So the first one is the search function. So this is simply, you just want to search a name. So you come into yes, you can select an entity or individual. Let's search one that visited you there, Howard. It's a ship called Lady R. And we can see from our search here, from an entity perspective, we've got a number of hits on her. So we can see here she's on the OFAC list, she's on the US Trade Consolidated list. Let's get more information. What's happening at this point in time? It's bringing the list information back, and the GPT is actually writing out the analysis on it. So here's our entity ID. That was what you were asking, Howard.
Yeah.
You can see our entity ID is quite substantial. There's a logic behind it, and that's how we actually get our IDs. It gives you the name, when it was submitted first time, on which lists they are, and then all the other information that's sort of applicable to it. You can get everything that you need to do. So this is all of the sanctions list. So this is the information we pull off the sanctions list. Then we go through Monitor GPT to actually bring out the information. One of the fundamental things that we've decided to incorporate from a transparency perspective, because this is one of the problems in this phase we are with AI, is the trust from a hallucination perspective, etc., is we not only give you the GPT's analysis, we also give you the actual links used to produce it. So you can go and check it out and make up your own mind about it. This is just we put it in as a fail-safe to stop the hallucination should it happen. So obviously we've got access. We are through our developers, we've got access to certain backend capabilities and OpenAI that's not available to general public, and we utilize that to ensure that we contain and isolate and move and limit hallucination as far as possible. But in essence, that's a very simple output that we can do. You can generate a report from this. So from a report perspective, as I mentioned, we can white label this. So for example, if you are an individual that does this for multiple companies, you can add your own logo to this. If you are a bank and you don't want to include our name, but you want to put the search report as part of your risk committee for a EDD on a high-risk client, this is available in white label that you can put your own logos and etc. on, and in essence it gives you all the outputs, and it gives you everything that's available. So this is the whole set of information, and then the Monitor GPT component is also included in the report. So you've got a full set that you can produce and take forward to a committee or use or save for purposes. If you decide to onboard a high-risk client, you can include this with the back so that they know what happened in the future if the regulator visits, for example. We then have our batch scan capabilities. So what we've got an example of the CSV template. We try and tell you as much as possible in terms of how we want it populated. Just so we put some of that on the user so that we don't have to do as much cleaning on our side, and we can actually get through the part that's our job, and that's scanning the data. Then you can upload it, and you can include the Monitor GPT in the output. Now, if you include it in the output, obviously there's a cost because we've got a GPT cost every time we call, and that's included there. You'll also notice on all of the pages, there's a little robot at the bottom. If you click on that, it takes you to the Monitor GPT standalone site, and you can go and do what you need to do there, and I'll take you through that now. We've got the API. So the API is all the documentation.
Roche.
Yes,
Roche. Are you then saying, hopefully I'm not bothering you,
Mm.
you're basically
No.
saying that in that situation, all are you matching on is just name or full name, date of birth, country, and that's you finding acceptable from a hit rate, a positive, and an acceptable deduplication.
Yes, it's not the best, but it's because of the availability of the information in the public domain. If we had an ID number,
Okay.
if ID number is public domain, it's easy. Then I don't even have to look at a name.
Yeah.
But it's not. So it's about public domain. And as I mentioned, Osama bin Laden, that 1947, that's it, nothing else. That was in the official sanctions list. I didn't know his date of birth further than 1947.
Yeah.
So, and that's why we have to have a probability hierarchy, right? It's catchments.
Yes.
We're making from smaller holes, from big holes at the top to smaller holes at the bottom to try and see how we can actually
I'm assuming the response you're giving back is containing all of those probabilities in terms of the probability of the match. So you're not implying that it's 100% match.
No, so what we do is we've got the way we do it is we show it as either a potential positive match, a borderline match. So it's we think it might be interesting, and then a potential false positive. So we split it out like that. So that gives you opportunity from a focusing perspective. So okay, we're going to focus on these lists first, then this it, and then this it.
Okay, nice. Okay, thank you.
And often one of the things that this especially for the target audience here today, is often what comes out of this is the data quality in your own client.
Yeah.
If you start asking for, if you go past date of birth, so first name, last name, date of birth, a lot of data sets fall flat. If you start asking for country, don't have it.
Yeah.
Address, it's stale, old. When did you get it? 1945. When was that first captured? It just gets crazy, and you just add to the craziness. So take the craziness away and focus on what you can focus on, and the rest of the things we try and catch with other methods.
And I'm assuming those buckets that you just shared with me, there's a percentage range that allow them to fall in those buckets.
Yeah.
And you're using some form of that fuzzy logic and then you almost giving us a range or a bracket that the fuzzy logic spits out. Yeah.
And we don't actually physically include the probabilities in it, because I think it's just over information again.
Right.
We try, and remember, the people that are getting this output is a legal profession, right? So they're typically lawyers, ex-lawyers, etc., etc. For them, looking at a probability and trying to explain probability to them, you're just messing up. You're just making it more complex than what you should. So just keep it simple and aligned to what it is. But should somebody have the mathematical understanding and the interest to look at it, we're happy to make it available. It's just out of a keeping it simple perspective now. Okay, so then we've got the API side, so you can generate your keys here, you can get our documentation here, all of that's available. Obviously, when you're using the API, this dashboard is irrelevant. You're not going to use it. You're going to be functioning with the API. Custom database. So this is where we've got a custom database. You can come upload wherever you want to. You can keep it as a whitelist. You can put it as a do not do business list. Whatever you want to do to be able to identify individuals trying to access your organization systems via onboarding, you can get an indication of. If it's high net worth individuals that you are aware enough. So let's say, for example, it's a wealth business. They wanted to check, the top 20 people in the country in terms of net asset value. If they try and onboard, we want to know about it because we want to do something special for them. You can do that. Whatever need you can find to try and identify somebody coming through your systems to onboard. That's what the custom database is for. You can download it, you can add a record, you can upload via CSV, a batch upload into this. You can match, you can do a manual match, you can wipe it, you can do what you want. You can delete individual records, you can view individual records, you can edit individual records. It's endless what you can do to that data set. Adverse media. So adverse media, we've split into 3 different sections. As a CSI element, we took the News 24 report on the state capture outcomes. So they digitized basically the state capture report. We tried as well. It just took extremely long to try and read through those. It was in the days before AI was so prevalent and available. We made it available. So it's there. You can go and check against that. Whoever's on the sanctions list, in the reports that's listed in the News 24 outcome, it's available, and you can go and have a look at it and search people against that list. Ultimately, that's included into our set, so it is there. You can have a look at that. RAHN Monitor, which I'll take you through now, which is obviously of Monitor GPT, which is the AI component, just from an analysis side or a screening perspective, and then adverse media. I like to think of this as a focused Google without the ads, right? So what we've done is the way our query works in the background, it's got a list of potential words that are associated with financial crime or anything like that. You can just come in here, put in the names, and it will search through it, and it will look against those names and provide you with outputs from 2,000 different news sources. So it's quite extensive. You can get a lot of information, a lot of research here without having to go through the noise of Google. Again, trying to make it more efficient, just make it easier for people to actually work through the data sets. Then monitor GPT-ing itself. So a couple of interesting features. So as this is progressing, we're fine-tuning it, finding new ways of doing it, etc., etc. We can use documents, we can use previous messages, you can set it and set it up. Now, if you type in help, the first thing you'll see is it's going to give you a little cost estimate. So what we've done is, because of the tokenization and the way it works, we actually convert the tokenization into a cost to tell the individual as they do this what it's going to cost them. They can either accept or decline the cost. And as I said, this is where things start progressing to the point we've now identified someone. This is one guy in our client set that we are worried about. We want to understand everything about him. And this is where we'll go in terms of that. So from this perspective, you obviously want to do this once, but it gives you an idea of what the type of things it can do, what the capabilities, and how we've designed the sanctions tool. So let's search for Lady R again. Let's actually find a better one, which is going to give us a better.
Simon's Town, Lady R.
So obviously Sam Bankman-Fried is from FTX. Most people should be aware of who he is. If you're not, this guy committed a lot of fraud, took a lot of people's money through a crypto wallet, if I'm not mistaken, a crypto exchange. I'm not too sure. Yeah, it's exchange. So there you go. Basically gives you all of the information that you need to know. You can get the detailed, and this is all real time coming off the internet now. So we could directly connect to the internet. So there's no latency that we've got to worry about when last was updated, etc., etc. But yeah, you can see that it's got quite an extensive list of information that it provides and sets out. Very useful for investigation. But as I said, this is where we start getting to the nuts and bolts. We've identified this guy, he's a problem, and we want to figure out who he is and go for that. In any case, it's going to run on. While it's doing that, we can carry on. All of the reports that you previously generated are here. You can come and download them. It's available. You get what you need to get out of that. And then finally, from a settings perspective, your individual elements will be populated in here. If you want to, you can put your social here. I mean, people like doing those things nowadays. The whitelist that's been generated by you is here. You can then obviously remove names from a whitelist. Now, what a whitelist, thanks, Carl. What a whitelist represents is we've identified somebody as a match. We've decided there's no risk. It's either a false positive, or there's a risk, but as an organization, we've gone through it and we're happy to accept that risk. You whitelist them. The next time around, if you screen your client base, you're not going to get a notification for that hit because he's been whitelisted. So it just shortens down that element of it. But you can purge it at any time. So anytime you can come in and you can purge it. Your notifications here, that's basically your continuous monitoring. So if you switch this on, it tells the system that you want us to keep your client data and continuously check that against the sanctions list. And if there's a change, please send us a notification that something's happened. And then finally, right here at the bottom, you can decide if you want your two-factor authentication on. And then, as I mentioned, the one button, clear all your information off. Just, I don't want to do business with you. Get out and go. So that's the tool in a nutshell. As you can see, it's gone through its thing. It's probably stopped up because I got off the page, but that's available. So that's the tool in a nutshell. But this doesn't represent the major part of it. The major part is the data that sits in the background and getting all of that together and having these searches run as fast as they do and as efficient as they do against that big data set. I mean, trying to run one record against 3.5 million is it's quite a mammoth task from a resourcing perspective, and it's done quite quickly and it works quite well. Yeah, that's basically my story. And then I don't know if there are any questions, further questions. I'm happy to answer those. And if anybody wants to talk to me offline about it and more information, I'm very happy to do that as well.
Fantastic, Roche. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I've got a few questions, but I'm sure there are others that may have. Any other questions for Roche?
Roche, just perhaps a quick one to understand better. So that probabilities that you guys are getting, that tells you how likely these records are supposed to match. What's behind that? Was there like some model trained on label data? Was it like a hard coded a bunch of rules or a combination of it? Just like to get some info on how that works.
It's evolution. Definitely evolution. It started out with what we developed for various clients is to try and solve these problems. As I mentioned previously, that 60,000 down to 5. That was part of the problem, to try and identify. And I come out of a credit risk background, so risk dissemination is one of the major elements with the credit risk, right? So if you think of probability, a probability of default, what you're trying to do is you're trying to identify and split risk out so that you can actually have what's risky float at the top and what's not risky sink to the bottom. So over time, that evolved, right? So it started with just counting characters, figuring out how they align, checking things, using phonetic functions within SQL. There's various elements that it's began at. It evolved from there to some form of machine learning, and that's we continuously expanding on that and growing that. So as we learn more, we're expanding on top of that. So it's by no means a static thing. It moves forward and it evolves continuously.
Okay, nice. Thanks.
Any other questions? Roche, is there any? I didn't see anything on your screen that said that it's an email that they can contact you on. Is it possible for you to put it in the chat?
Yeah,
So if anyone would like to reach out to you, and then of course link.
It's on my wall behind me.
Ah, there it is. Didn't pay attention. Thank you.
That's fine. I've got it on the chat as well.
Excellent. Great.
So,
Roche,
well,
thank you. Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. It's good
great
to see you again. Yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you. Nice work. You guys are doing some great work.
Thank you. We've got a good team, and there's a lot of late nights gone into this, but you know, it's a labor of love.
Fantastic. And one of the question that I had was, if I'm a big financial service, one of my biggest worries is that I've got a massive customer database, and just tomorrow someone does something silly, and then I've got a problem, and then I'm doing business with a bad boy list. Now, is it practical that they give you, and if they haven't done a great job at mastering it, that they'll give you all of their customers, load it all up, and this is where you were talking about those volumes, is that correct? So they would actually you that daily monitor that somebody has crept in and they've got some problems. And I'm assuming not many of them are doing that type of thing.
Yeah, so the way I typically like to do it is first create a baseline, right? So say line in the sand and say, okay, we are going to scan everybody that was on our books up to today, because from tomorrow, we're using the real-time system to make sure that everybody comes through is on it. That being said, it's good practice, and you find your bigger FSPs actually scan their entire data set every night.
Yeah.
They make sure every night there's nobody that crept through a crack somewhere. There's nobody that was fraudulently onboarded through a branch that never came through the onboarding process. They bypassed the onboarding process. So it's very much dependent. So the whole legislation, and a lot of legislation nowadays, you'll know, is on this risk-based approach, right? So it's how much risk is there for me, and where do I identify risk? And the regulator typically is fairly happy with, if you've identified risks and you've mentioned them and you're very much aware of them and you've got ways of measuring against them. They don't typically come and tell you these are all the risks that you have. They just want to make sure that you've at least identified something and you're working around that. So. And it's of course because of resource constraints on their side and things like that. It's not out of they don't want to. So that's the first starting point. So your risk mitigation and compliance plan, RMCP, would contain what is the standard that you as an organization have set for yourself. Is it that we do daily population scans? Do we do weekly population scans? Do we do monthly, quarterly, 6 monthly? You know, what is our standard that we want to do based on the risk that we perceive is in our book? If we say that we are a short-term insurer and or let's say a long-term insurer, right? So we're a life insurance company. So from a life insurance perspective, they regard their product as low risk because it's a pension product. It's life insurance. It's not something that you can take a haircut and get your money out. If you take a pension haircut, it's a 45% potential haircut that you're taking plus your penalties. So that's a massive cost to launder your money. So at this point in time, there are cheaper avenues. Eventually, they'll get there once all the other avenues start closing down.
Yeah.
So from a risk-based perspective, a long-term insurer and a bank has got two different views to this, right? So a long-term insurer might say, you know, once a month of scanning our base is fine, versus a bank could say, no, we actually want to scan it on a daily basis, maybe twice.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
And I'm assuming you're using all of those hash keys, those entity things, to really just compare against the hash keys. Once they've loaded it up, you've got your list of all the naughty boys. You can then match it on those keys and not go through all of the alphanumerics and stuff like that.
We go through the alphanumerics as well because of data quality. Data quality is the other problem. So this is where the fuzzy logic comes in, because then we start looking at initials and surname. We start looking at first name and the initial of the surname. You know, how do these match up? So it depends on how deep into the abyss you start going with the fuzzy logic and the quality of the data.
That fuzzy logic's got to work on the alphanumeric. It can't work on the hash value.
Yeah. And then obviously what's come out of this quite often is data remediation programs, because then we say, okay, listen here, we've scanned your base. There's 60,000 hits, for example, of which 5 are really accurate, but the balance of them, there's actually data quality issues. And in different contexts, I can have a chat to you about an interesting approach we've used to sort out data quality on tables and to be able to build automated reporting out of that. But that's a side note to this. In this context, it's trying to identify as much, get that sorted out, then start fixing your data. Here's the data that you need to fix from. So as you know, often a stick is better than a carrot in our industry. If the regulatory guys running to the IT office and say, guys, here's people we can't screen for sanctions. That's a risk for our license. Please fix. Often the money flows from business to solve that problem, whereas if it's a different unit, then that money doesn't necessarily flow to solve that problem. So
correct. There was someone who just finished a book and they call it Data Governance Needs Risk Management.
I believe if you don't get data governance right, you've got the biggest operational risk that you can expose yourself to.
But it is helpful that data governance people understand how to talk risk and how to use risk as justifying the value that they contribute, so.
Yeah, 100%.
Roche, thank you very much. And Sybil, also appreciate it. Thanks for all your help and effort. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Any further questions before we go? Thanks, Sybil. Sorry. Okay, everyone's done.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers, everybody.
Enjoy.